I hired a private investigator to follow my wife's writing workshop. The evidence destroyed 25 years. I've always been the steady one. Andrew Baker, AB to most who know me, the guy who plans ahead, stays calm in a crisis, and keeps the ship sailing smoothly. 25 years at the same engineering firm, designing tech equipment that most people will never see but rely on every day. 25 years married to Karen, watching our two daughters grow into brilliant young women who made us proud with every step. That's the story I told myself anyway. It's a strange thing when your children leave home. Claire's been at Brown for 3 years now, studying international relations with dreams of changing the world. Denise just started her freshman year at Boston University, pursuing computer science with the same quiet determination I recognize in myself. Both on scholarship, smart girls, my daughters. Our house feels different now, quieter. The spaces that once buzzed with teenage energy and drama now echo with silence. I thought Karen and I would fill those spaces together, rediscover what brought us together before parenthood consumed our lives. I imagined weekend trips, long conversations over wine, maybe even dancing in the kitchen like we did when we were newlyweds. But something's shifted. Karen seems distant, preoccupied. She stays later at the high school where she teaches English, joins more committees, finds reasons to be anywhere but home with me. When she is here, she's buried in her phone, smiling at messages I can't see. 25 years of marriage, and suddenly I'm noticing things I've never seen before. The way she tilts her head when checking her notifications, how she's changed her perfume, the new clothes appearing in her closet. "Everything okay?" I asked last night as she canceled our dinner plans again. "Just busy with the AP curriculum changes," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You understand." "I do understand. I've always understood. That's my role." Steady Andrew, patient AB, the man who never rocks the boat. But lately I find myself standing at our bedroom window, staring out at the neighborhood we've called home for 2 decades, wondering what lies beneath the perfect surface of our lives. For the first time in years, I feel something stirring inside me. Not just disappointment or loneliness, but something sharper. Suspicion. What if everything I've believed about our life together has been built on shifting sand? What happens when the patient man finally reaches the end of his patience? I first heard about the writing group over a year ago. Karen mentioned it casually over dinner, just another faculty initiative at her school. But in January, after Denise left for Boston, the group suddenly became Karen's passion. "It's not just teachers anymore," she explained, eyes bright with excitement I hadn't seen in years. "We've opened it to the community. There's this incredible diversity of voices now." I was happy for her, truly. Karen had notebooks filled with story fragments dating back to college, dreams deferred while raising our daughters. If this group rekindled that spark, how could I object? But 6 months in, I barely recognize my wife. Her phone buzzes constantly with group messages. Thursday evenings, sacred date nights for 20 years, are now writing workshops that run late into the night. When she returns, her cheeks are flushed, her eyes animated as she describes heated debates about character development and narrative structure. "Frank challenged my entire 3rd chapter today," she said last week, dropping her bag by the door. "He thinks my protagonist is making choices no real woman would make." Frank, always Frank. I've met him twice, a former advertising executive turned literary fiction aspirant, as he introduces himself. Mid-50s, divorced, with carefully cultivated stubble and horn-rimmed glasses. The type who quotes Hemingway without irony and touches Karen's arm when he speaks to her. "Frank says I have real potential," Karen told me after their last meeting. "He thinks I should submit to the Illinois Writers' Workshop this summer." "Illinois?" I asked, my coffee cup suspended midway to my lips. "That's a 6-week program." Karen nodded, not meeting my eyes. "The best in the country?" "What about our Alaska trip? We've been planning it for 2 years." She shrugged, a gesture so dismissive it felt like a slap. "We can go to Alaska anytime. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Last night, I found myself parked outside the community center, watching as their meeting ended. I told myself I was just offering Karen a ride home. The forecast had mentioned rain. But as they emerged in 2s and 3s, laughing and gesturing animatedly, I sank lower in my seat. Karen was last, walking beside Frank. She said something I couldn't hear, and he threw his head back in laughter before placing his hand on the small of her back as they descended the steps. They paused beneath the streetlight, their faces close as they talked. Too close. My stomach clenched as I watched them say goodbye. A lingering hug, his lips brushing her cheek. Not the farewell of casual acquaintances or even friendly colleagues. I drove home before Karen could see me, my mind racing with possibilities I didn't want to consider. When she arrived 30 minutes later, I pretended to be asleep. This morning, I found a confirmation email for the Illinois workshop on our shared printer. It wasn't just the workshop details that caught my eye, but the attached housing information. A cozy, two-bedroom cottage reserved in Karen's name. For one person or two? The question burns in my throat as I sit across from her at breakfast, watching her tap away at her phone with a private smile. 25 years of trust feels suddenly fragile, like ice in spring that might give way beneath my feet at any moment. The official announcement came over dinner last night. Karen had prepared my favorite, beef bourguignon with crusty bread, and opened a bottle of the Cabernet we'd been saving for our anniversary. "I got in," she said, sliding an envelope across the table. "The Illinois Writers' Workshop accepted me." I'd known this was coming, but the finality of it still knocked the wind from me. 6 weeks, nearly half the summer we'd planned to spend reconnecting. "When do you leave?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice neutral. "June 10th. She was watching me carefully, gauging my reaction. "I'll be back before Claire's birthday in July." I nodded, taking a long sip of wine. "And where will you be staying?" "They've arranged housing on campus," she answered too quickly. "Small apartments for participants." A lie. I'd seen the cottage reservation myself. "Can I visit?" I asked. Her hesitation was brief but unmistakable. "It's pretty intense, Andrew. Workshops all day, writing assignments at night. I'm not sure there'd be time." Her words faded as I processed what she wasn't saying. "I don't want you there." Last night, I heard her on the phone well after midnight. I'd pretended to be asleep, but her hushed tones from the bathroom drew me to consciousness. "I can't talk long," she whispered. "No, he's asleep. Of course I'm sure. It's not that simple. There's no one waiting for me there, that's the whole point." My heart pounded so loudly I was certain she would hear it through the bedroom door. When she returned, I kept my breathing deep and even, though sleep was now impossible. This morning, I confronted her. "Who were you talking to at midnight?" She didn't look up from her toast. "Reggie, from the writing group. He's nervous about submitting his manuscript." "At midnight?" "He's going through a divorce. Nights are hard for him." Her eyes finally met mine, challenging. "You told him there's no one waiting for you in Illinois." Color drained from her face. "You were eavesdropping?" "You were lying." She recovered quickly. "You misheard. I told him there's no one waiting for me to finish my novel. No publisher, no agent. But I've been married to this woman for 25 years. I know the cadence of her lies, rare as they've been. After she left for school, I made a call I never imagined making. The detective's office was in a strip mall across town. Henderson Investigations stenciled discreetly on the door. Mike Henderson looked nothing like the hard-boiled private eyes in movies. He wore khakis and a golf shirt, and his office smelled like coffee and cinnamon. "Marital surveillance is about 40% of my business," he said matter-of-factly, after I explained my situation. "We're discreet, thorough, and unfortunately usually right about our suspicions." His words settled like stones in my stomach. I handed over Karen's itinerary, Frank's information, and half of his retainer. "I've never done anything like this," I admitted, my signature wavering on his contract. "Nobody ever has until they do," he replied kindly. "The not knowing is always worse than the truth, Mr. Baker. One way or another, you'll have peace soon." Peace. As I drove home, I wondered if I'd ever feel peace again. The man I've been for 25 years, steady, trusting, patient, wouldn't recognize the person I've become in 2 weeks. Suspicion has transformed me, sharpening my edges, darkening my thoughts. What happens if Henderson confirms my fears? Could I forgive her? Would I even want to? And perhaps more terrifying, what if I'm wrong? What if this investigation destroys the trust that's been the foundation of our marriage? By the time Karen leaves for Illinois, I'll have my answers. The question is whether our marriage will survive them. Henderson's email arrived 3 weeks into Karen's workshop. We have conclusive evidence, available to discuss at your convenience. My hands trembled as I called him. I'd rather show you in person, he said, his voice gentle in a way that confirmed my worst fears. His office felt smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was the one who had shrunk, collapsing inward with each day of Karen's absence. Henderson didn't waste time with pleasantries. I'm sorry, Mr. Baker. He slid a manila folder across his desk. These were taken outside a restaurant in Urbana last week. The photographs were crisp, professional. Karen and Frank dining on a patio, their fingers intertwined across the table, Karen throwing her head back in laughter at something he said, Frank brushing her hair from her face, his touch lingering. There's more, Henderson said, cueing something on his laptop. This is from 2 days ago, the cottage she rented. The video showed them returning after dark, Frank's arm around Karen's waist. At the door, they paused. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, not the furtive kiss of an affair just beginning, but the familiar, unhurried kiss of established lovers. Karen kissed him back with a passion I hadn't seen from her in years. I have audio as well, Henderson offered. Phone conversations, if you... No. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. I've seen enough. I left his office with the folder and a hollow space where my heart used to be. 25 years. 2 children raised. Countless crises weathered together, all erased by a few minutes of video. That night, I sat in our darkened living room until dawn, surrounded by family photos that now felt like props on a stage set. How long had our marriage been a performance? When had I stopped being her partner and become merely her audience? By morning, I knew what I had to do. I spent the day emptying our joint accounts, leaving half in a separate account for Karen. I forwarded Henderson's evidence to my personal email, then contacted a divorce attorney who promised to begin paperwork immediately. I booked a hotel for a month and packed 2 suitcases with my essentials. The last thing I did was write an email. Karen, I know about Frank. I've seen you together in Illinois. There's nothing left to explain or discuss. I've moved out and contacted a divorce attorney. Half of our savings is in your personal account. I don't want the house. I don't want explanations. I don't want to hear how it just happened or that it didn't mean anything. 25 years deserved better than this. Tell the girls whatever you want. I'll speak with them soon. Andrew. I was surprised by how calm I felt after sending it. No tears, no rage, just a strange, floating sensation, as if I'd cut the tether anchoring me to earth and was drifting away. My phone rang almost immediately. Karen. I silenced it and watched as text messages flooded in. Please answer. It's not what you think. We need to talk. Andrew, please. Later, the hotel bed felt vast and cold as I stared at the ceiling, wondering who I was now that I wasn't Karen's husband. For 25 years, my identity had been father, provider, partner. What remained when those roles were stripped away? The anger would come later, I knew. The grief, the recriminations, the bitter tallying of wasted years. But in that moment, all I felt was a strange, hollow freedom, like a man who has finally put down a burden he didn't realize he'd been carrying, only to discover his arms have forgotten how to do anything else. 3 days after sending that email, I returned to our house while Karen was still in Illinois. I'd calculated the timing carefully. She wouldn't be back for another week, long enough for me to extract myself completely from the life we'd built. I moved methodically through rooms that no longer felt like mine, collecting the remnants of 25 years. My father's watch, the first editions Claire had given me for Christmas, photos of the girls I'd taken myself. I left the wedding album untouched on the shelf. In the garage, I found boxes of my old engineering journals and college textbooks I'd kept for sentimental reasons. I took only one, the fluid dynamics text where Karen had written her phone number 27 years ago, after we met in the university library. A reminder of what had once been real, even if it wasn't anymore. Before leaving, I placed the divorce papers on the dining room table, along with printed copies of the most damning photos Henderson had provided. Not all of them, I wasn't cruel enough to leave the intimate ones, but enough for Karen to understand that denial was pointless. Next to them, I left my house key and wedding ring. I'd already contacted a realtor. The for sale sign would go up tomorrow. My phone continued buzzing with Karen's calls and messages, but I'd changed my number by the time she returned home to find half our life missing and divorce papers waiting. My attorney told me she'd called his office 17 times in one day. "She's demanding to speak with you," he said. "Says there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I replied. "Just have her sign the papers." Claire called next, her voice tight with confusion and anger. "Dad, what the hell is going on? Mom's hysterical. She says you've left and won't talk to her." "Has she told you why?" I asked. "She says you think she cheated, but it's not true. She says it's all a mistake." I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. "Ask her about Frank, Claire. Ask her about the cottage in Illinois. She's lying to you like she lied to me." "But I have photos, Claire. Videos. Don't make me show them to you." Silence stretched between us. Then softly, "Oh, Dad." Denise's call came the next day, more practical than emotional. "Mom's a mess. The house is going on the market. What's your plan here?" "I'm moving to Portland," I told her. "Maine, not Oregon. I've accepted a position with Atlantic Engineering." "That's 3,000 miles away." "That's the point." I could hear her thinking, my pragmatic daughter always 3 steps ahead. "You're not coming back, are you?" "Not even if she begs." "No?" Karen's email arrived a week after I'd settled into my new apartment, a top-floor unit overlooking Casco Bay. The subject line read simply, "Please. Andrew, I know I've lost the right to ask anything of you, but please, just one conversation. Let me explain. What you saw, it wasn't what I planned when I went to Illinois. Frank was a mistake, a terrible, unforgivable mistake. 25 years can't end like this. We built a life together. We raised our daughters. We survived so much. Please don't throw it all away without even talking to me. I still love you. I always have. Karen." I deleted it without responding, then walked out onto my balcony. The air smelled of salt and possibility. Below, sailboats dotted the harbor, their white sails bright against the blue water. In the distance, forested islands rose from the bay, places I'd soon explore. For the first time in months, I took a deep breath that didn't hurt. My phone rang. My new number that only Claire and Denise had. It was Karen. Somehow she'd gotten it. I silenced the call and blocked the number. The next day, I enrolled in sailing lessons. The following week, I joined a hiking club. I bought plants for my balcony, learned to cook Thai food, and started playing the guitar I'd abandoned when Claire was born. Each night, I fell asleep to the sound of waves instead of questions. Each morning, I woke to possibilities instead of suspicions. The anger that I'd expected to consume me had instead burned away quickly, leaving behind something unexpected: freedom. 25 years ago, I'd merged my identity with Karen's so completely I'd forgotten where she ended and I began. Now, alone in a city where no one knew my name, I was discovering who Andrew Baker might be when he belonged only to himself. 6 months after moving to Portland, I walked along the harbor at sunset, marveling at how foreign my old life now seemed. The divorce had finalized 3 weeks earlier. Karen had finally stopped fighting and signed the papers after our house sold. My apartment had become a home. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes I'd always wanted to read but never found time for. A telescope stood by the balcony door for watching ships and stars. My guitar waited beside a comfortable chair where I now spent evenings practicing. At work, I'd been promoted to lead the offshore wind turbine project. Innovative work that challenged me in ways my old position never had. My colleagues had become friends who invited me sailing, hiking, and to dinner parties where I was simply Andrew, not half of Andrew and Karen. The girls visited monthly. Claire arrived first, still angry at her mother, but working through it. Our conversations on the rocky Maine beaches helped us both heal. Denise followed a week later, practical as always, bringing homemade cookies and questions about retirement accounts. "You look good, Dad," Denise said during her last visit. "Happier than I've seen you in years." "I am," I realized, surprised by the truth of it. Karen still emailed occasionally. Her messages evolved from desperate pleas to resigned updates. She'd moved to a smaller place, started therapy, reconnected with her sister. Frank was gone. His wife had discovered their affair and their relationship had collapsed under the weight of reality. I felt nothing reading these messages. Not satisfaction, not anger, not pain, just a distant acknowledgement of a life no longer connected to mine. Last week, I met someone. Julia teaches marine biology at the university and has the same quietness I've always valued in myself. We met at a lecture on tidal ecosystems and talked until the janitor kicked us out. Nothing may come of it, but for the first time, I'm open to possibilities. Sometimes I wonder if I should have seen Karen's betrayal coming. Were there signs I missed, or did I simply choose not to see them? The engineer in me wants to analyze the failure points to understand exactly how 25 years collapsed so completely. But most days, I'm looking forward now, not back. This morning, I stood on my balcony watching the sunrise paint the bay in gold and pink. A foghorn sounded in the distance as fishing boats headed out for the day. I breathed in the salt air and felt something I hadn't expected to find after such heartbreak: contentment. Not happiness exactly, though that comes more frequently now. Something deeper, the recognition that endings, even painful ones, can open doors to rooms in yourself you never knew existed. That sometimes what feels like drowning is actually learning to swim in deeper waters. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in decades, I'm curious to find out. And that curiosity, that openness to whatever comes next, that feels like freedom.